I am a professional patient. That's what I tell people. This
Hmm.
is my job to keep myself healthy, that I had eye health goals and I want to be able to see when I'm 65.
Hello, and welcome to another installment of My Hero 360. My name is Kerri Fitzgerald, and today we are highlighting the hero story of Eritrea Mussa. My Hero 360 seeks to amplify the stories of remarkable individuals who inspire others through their words and actions. And your story does just that. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Carrie. I'm excited for today.
So, to start, can you introduce yourself and just provide some background for our audience?
Absolutely. My name is Eritrea Mussa. I was born and raised here in Dallas, Texas, raised for the most part. I think we're going to get into that a little bit today. Both of my parents are multicultural, so they're from outside of the country. I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when I was 8 years old and was diagnosed with diabetic macular edema when I was older in my late 20s. I've been living with diabetes for about 23 years now, and I am an advocate and work in the diabetes space as well.
Excellent. Thank you for joining us. And, when you and I spoke before this interview, you had mentioned that, like you said, you were diagnosed when you were 8, and you also participated in clinical trials all over the world. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience and what that was like?
Yeah, so when I was first diagnosed, both my parents, like their education comes from other countries, and they were just like, there has to be a way for us to find some type of a solution or cure for her diabetes. Insulin is not a cure, it's really just like a support system for you to have treatment for your disease.
Right.
So the first thing that my mom did was call people in Mexico because my mom is from Mexico, and she found a clinical trial that was only a few hours away from my grandmother's house. So when I was 9, on my ninth birthday, we went to Mexico for me to spend a week in Mexico. My parents got me a dog and let me know that I would not be leaving Mexico. I would be staying with my grandmother, much to my surprise and horror.
Uh,
I'd be staying with my grandmother and doing the fourth grade in Mexico while completing this clinical
wow.
trial. And that was my first clinical trial as a child, which was only about 3 to 5 months after my diagnosis. So it was really quick. Right after diagnosis, not only did they start the clinical trial, but they also started with diabetes camps and just really trying to get me as much education about diabetes as possible at my young age. So even when I was in Mexico for the trial, I had so many resources that my parents had already provided me with. So that staying with my grandmother alone, even though she's elderly and I was basically managing my new diabetes by myself, I wasn't like scared or anything. I knew what to do.
Hmm. And so you talked about going to Mexico and spending your fourth grade year there while you were working on the clinical trial. Were there any other, lifestyle changes or impacts that you and your family had to navigate as it relates to, your type 1 diabetes?
Yeah, so at the time when I was living in Mexico with my grandma, I'm one of four siblings. So I wasn't with my brothers, but when I did come home, I noticed that things were a little different. Like my mom made it a point that we all ate the same meal together. It didn't matter that I had diabetes. Like the meal that she was making, she would make it work for diabetes, and everyone else had to make it work for them.
Uh-huh.
Same kind of thing for like sports. So like if we went to school during the day, like if I was here for school, at the end of the day, we'd have dinner as soon as we got home from school so that she had enough time for my blood sugars to settle before we went to like karate or gymnastics or whatever our next appointment was. I think a lot of it was them normalizing the diabetes to everyone around me. So it wasn't like she can't do this because she has diabetes. It would be she can do this, but we need to be careful, and this is what you need to know. So I
Hmm.
always felt really empowered by my parents and all of the changes and adaptations to things that they made so that I could feel comfortable. My name wouldn't even be Eritrea without my parents. Like I wouldn't be anything without them. So I
Uh,
try to be as grateful as I can. It was really tough for them. Like
I,
coming to America, my dad was in the child militia in Africa. My mom was like put herself through school in Mexico. Like both of them just like opposite sides of the planet and somehow like were able to figure this out. So they were like clinical trial in Mexico, clinical trial in London, clinical
yeah.
trial in Germany. I really everything that I am is my parents. Like I'm so lucky.
Wow. That's incredible. That's beautiful.
I love being like, oh, don't talk to me, talk to Iman. Talk to my friend
Mm,
Mohammed, who's like a doctor who graduated in Gaza and now lives in London. Talk to Sadine Farhat, who's in Lebanon and who like did supplies for the Beirut blast. Talk
yeah.
to Noor, who's from Abu Dhabi. Talk to Syra, who works for Tide Pool in California. Like I love being able to connect industry, my work, people like you to amazing advocates, people who are living with diabetes and who are incredible. I wrote a book with my friend Syra called Type Strong, and it highlights people living with diabetes who have done incredible things. And most of the people in that book are my friends. Like I
Wow.
can pick up my phone and call Gary Forbes, who's one in three people to play back like in the NBA with Type 1, or my other friend Lauren, who's like a number three draft pick out of Baylor, who's in the WNBA and now plays in Australia, and be like, hey, what's up, friend? Like, can you help me? Can you talk to Kerri? Can you talk to so and so because it's going to help people with diabetes? And they're like, hell yeah, let's, you know what? Hell yeah, let's do it. And I feel so lucky that I get to do all of that.
I'm so glad that you had positive experiences with clinical trials, right? That you want to recommend that to other people because there's still, fear or stigma or, and rightfully so. But it is an important part, right, of getting new medications that are important or therapeutics that can hopefully help people. So
The
it's
thing I
great
tell,
to have that.
the thing I tell folks all the time is like, I am willing to be the first so that I can open the door for more people that trust me. So
Yeah.
I have good trust with the African American community because I am African American. I have good trust with the Latino community because I'm Latino. So it's like I will go places. Like last year, I got this really great opportunity to go to something called Slipstream, which is hosted by a company called Connected in Motion, and it's an adult type 1 diabetes camp, but not a lot of people of color go.
Okay.
Why? So I went to the camp and I was like, is this a safe place for people of color? And I
Mhm.
found out that not only was it a safe place, like when there were moments that I felt uncomfortable and I talked to staff, they were like, let's fix this and this is how we're going to fix it. So that I wanted to promote this to people and be like, go to this camp. It is safe there. Check it out. And I
Mhm.
think more of my friends are going to these slipstreams now because they're like, that is so cool. That's so awesome. Like, it's great that you had a great experience and now I can go try.
Yeah.
I am a little bit more brave because my parents would just literally drop me in countries and then run away. So I don't really have a lot of fear about going places with people with diabetes. So I
Right.
am so willing to like be that person to show up and be the first one so that I can like open the door and be like, more of us should come here and this is why.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
That's
awesome.
wonderful. That's really great. A few years ago, you had an experience with diabetic macular edema, also known as DME. Can you share that story?
Yeah, so I love this story. It's really funny, actually. So I've always been a really impatient person. I'm quick to have a temper, and I had been out of town for a while. And my partner at the time, when I came home, I was coming back from a trip that was like Europe, Africa with my dad, like a long trip. And I'd been gone for a month. And I remember I got home, and all of the garbage from that month had not been taken out. And I was so frustrated. Ladies, if you know,
Yeah.
like,
Yes.
oh my goodness, how could you not do this while I was out of town? And I was so frustrated. It was around the holiday season. And I remember us getting to this argument and me being so upset that I felt like I blew a vessel in my eye. Like that's all I could think. I was like, oh my God, because suddenly I had floaters in my eye while I was like screaming at this gentleman. And I was like, oh my God. I remember clutching my eye and being like, I'm blind. Like I cannot see out of my eye. And the argument absolutely no longer being important and it just being like, what is happening with my eye? So we went to CVS and we got an eye patch because I was like,
Mhm.
this is it. Like I'm blind now. We tried our best to get me into an appointment. So I have I'm sorry, my ophthalmologist has been the same eye doctor for my entire diabetes career. So since I was 9, I've had the same eye doctor, Dr. Kradaski here in Dallas. And he referred me to a friend. He was like, I'm going to get you in, even though it's the holidays, come see me in the office, which is around the corner from my parents' house. Went to go see him. He was like, yep, we've been keeping an eye on diabetic retinopathy for you for some time now and it's advanced now to diabetic macular edema. This is not your fault. This is something that happens over time with having diabetes. And I'm going to get you in to see my friend who's a specialist who's going to see you the first week of January. And I was like, Doctor, it is December 22nd. He's like, this is the best we can do. So I had to like wait. And I think that that waiting period was so excruciating because I would go outside and I would look at the sky. And I remember I would like take mental pictures. So I'd be like, what if this is the last time I could see the sky? Or I would like take mental pictures of everything around me and just trying to be so like rooted in gratitude, like so grateful I got to have eyesight for 28 years. And then when I finally went to go see the specialist, who I love him, Dr. Kowalski, he is so great. Like I can text him right now. We have a really good relationship. The first thing that happened was in that waiting room, every single person was elderly. And
Mm.
I was like, oh, I'm not here with my peers. Like, I'm here with people who are truly losing their eyesight, which was terrifying
Yeah.
until I got in to see him. And he was like, calm down. That's not what's going on.
Mhm.
There's a lot of stuff happening. So let's talk through what's going on with your eye. And then we can talk about solutions and what that looks like and what the prognosis of this disease will be with you.
Mhm.
Um, and it was really great. So I felt a lot better about it once I got in there and stopped freaking myself out because that's really what I was doing.
Yeah. Were you scared or worried that kind of the vision loss could be permanent?
Yeah, I think I was like, my luck with diabetes has run out. When you've been living with diabetes for a long time, especially from a young age, and times have changed now in diabetes education, but back then a lot of it was if you don't do this, this will happen. If you don't do this, this will happen. So being like in 28, 29, I was like, I've had diabetes for almost 20 years. Like, of course it is happening to me now. So
Mhm.
I was kind of terrified that my luck had run out and I was like out of it and I was just going to completely lose my eyesight, but that was not the case at all.
Yeah. And so, for people who aren't aware, can you talk about the link between diabetes and then these ocular or eye conditions like diabetic retinopathy, as you mentioned, and DME?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you live with diabetes, you strain your eyes sometimes, and you can also strain other organs. There's a lot of diabetes complications that can arise from diabetes itself. So over time, the nerves in your eyes, they can like start to bleed a bit. And that's what started to happen with my eye. So my retinopathy went from just being a bit of retinopathy, so a little bleeding here and there, a little bleeding there, to full on a diabetic macular edema, where there is so much blood there that is now impacting your eyesight and causing like floaters or like light spots or essentially if you think about like a piece of fabric like holes in it.
Mhm.
So from there I was basically like diabetes had already set me up this way. Also your genetics has a lot to do with this. So there's a lot of things that come into play with diabetes complications.
Mhm.
When I talked to my doctor, he was like, this isn't because I kept thinking it was something I did
Mhm.
and that I had caused this and it was my fault. And he was like, this is not your fault. This is just the causation of having diabetes for as long as you've had it. Um,
Mhm.
and so from there, I learned that essentially what my eye was doing was bleeding from the inside. So when I went to go see the specialist for DME, he said, if your eye was a house, the basement is flooded. And
Mhm.
what we need to do is get all that water out of there with treatment.
Mhm.
Once we get all that water out of there, maybe we can rebuild the floorboards. And
Mhm.
I loved how he explained it to me because it really gave me the ability to like wrap my mind around what that looks like. Because that doesn't sound like scorched earth. It doesn't sound like we have to blow the house up and get rid of it and give you a false eye. It's just you're going to need some treatment. We're going to see how you respond to it, and we're going to figure out what the next best thing for you is.
Yeah. I love that metaphor about the house. And um, it's incredible because sometimes there's so much medical jargon thrown at you, or as a patient, or you may be overwhelmed by a doctor's appointment. You're not even really comprehending. So I love that your doctor really gave it to you in words that really anyone can understand. That's really incredible.
Yeah, and I was able to not just wrap my mind around it, but then the next appointment, I was like, how's the basement? Like,
Yeah, yeah.
it's so flooded. Can we rebuild floorboards now, right? Because I learned that that treatment, even in itself, like, he was basically priming me. Like, the basement is flooded means you're going to need a shot in your eye. We're
Mhm.
ready to build floorboards means maybe we're going to do a laser this time. And
Mhm.
now I'm in such a great place where it's treatment as needed because I go every 3 months without fail. I make sure I check in, we look at my eye and we make a decision as a team.
Yeah.
When I first met my doctor, one of the things that I told him, because I am a professional patient, that's what I tell people, this
Mhm.
is my job to keep myself healthy, that I had eye health goals and I want to be able to see when I'm 65.
Yeah.
Can you make that happen? And he
Mhm.
was like, I love that. Yes, we can make that happen. And this is how we're going to do that. So I think
Yeah.
also that part was really important. It was me advocating for myself and being like, in the long run, this is the result I expect. Can
Mhm.
we get there so that I can manage my expectations?
That's incredible. And I think that's a great piece of information for people to hear and really think about advocating for yourself and thinking of health goals. That's really great. So can you tell us a little bit more about how the DME was treated? How did you and your doctor go about addressing that?
So the first time I came in, we decided to do a laser. So he started with the laser and a shot in the
Okay.
same appointment. And I was so scared because someone says, as a diabetic with lots of needles all the time, I'm not scared of them. But in my eye, I
Yeah.
was like, what do you mean? Like, my eye is so small. Like, I'm so scared. He's like, I promise this is not going to hurt. And I was like, I've heard this song before. Like, I've seen this film before.
Yeah.
I don't know if I like the ending. So
Yeah.
I had to have a lot of trust with him. And we did treat it that day, and I immediately saw results. Like, it was instantaneous that those floaters were just gone. And so
Wow.
I was like, oh, okay, like I'm cured. And then I kind of had to learn the hard way that No, you're not. Come back after 3 months, stick to your appointments because if you don't, like the floaters can come back. It's like if you get all the flooding out of the basement and you just leave it alone. Like, no,
Mm-hmm.
it's gonna re-flood because you haven't followed up. So in
Yeah.
that original appointment, that's how we started. And then after that, it's been mostly laser the entire
Okay.
time. So I think I've gotten a shot in my eye about 3 times max. And since then, we've done laser, and I haven't needed a shot or a laser in about 6 to 8 months now. So we're doing good. We're doing well.
Wow. A shot in your eye.
So the way it starts off is you come into the appointment and the first thing that they do is like a little eye test. So you start with one like assistant and then they take you to another room and they like have you remove your contacts or your glasses or whatever. And then they give you an IV in your hand
Okay.
for dye, like eye dye, because
Mhm.
they're looking for where the edema is, like where the bleeding is really happening in your eye. Then they'll have you sit up to a screen where they're like taking pictures of the actual eye from the front and from the back all over. You can't really see anything at this point because your eyes are dilated and you have dye in them. And they even tell you like you might taste something funny or feel something warm. So that's
Mhm.
kind of what happens.
Mhm.
Then from there, the doctor takes me into his office. Then I see him. He looks at my eye some more. We talk through what he sees, what he doesn't see. We decide what kind of treatment he's going to do. I've had an experience with him before where my insurance didn't cover the treatment. It was Vabysmo. So he decided that I don't think my insurance was covering it or something like that. And so he was like, I have some samples.
Mm.
So my doctor helped me out and got me a sample of the treatment that he wanted to do. And I responded really well to that treatment. So
Mm.
we've continued to do that after he wrote like a letter of medical necessity to my insurance to make sure that it would be covered moving forward and why it needed to be covered and all of that. So it overall for me, the experience has been really positive, even though I was really scared.
Yeah. It just shows again your doctor really being a partner to you in this and advocating for your needs and walking you through a very scary situation. So I'm glad you had that experience. So you've also become a content creator, really sharing your personal experience with diabetes and navigating the healthcare system. What do you think prompted you to kind of change course in your career and focus on this?
So a lot of things happened. The pandemic happened.
Mm.
And I remember the first post I made about diabetes. It was, I used to carry this big bag because I used to work for the school district here in Dallas. I used to help build apps and teach teachers how to use these applications in their classrooms. So a
Mhm.
lot of my job required me to leave my home,
Mhm.
drive 40 minutes downtown. And when you have type 1 diabetes, like you have to always be prepared. So I'd carry this like big plastic bag of like stuff,
Mhm.
extra sensor, extra syringe, extra cartridge, extra insulin, extra glucagon, all this stuff.
Yeah.
And someone at work once asked me, like, why do you have such a big purse like all the time, dude? Like, are you good? And I was like, dude, I have to carry this big old thing around. Like, I don't want to bring it, but like, I'd rather be safe than sorry. I don't want to have to leave work to just change a site for my insulin pump. I'd rather just take a minute, go to the bathroom, change it, and continue about my day and be a person, a normal person.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, this is an invisible disease. Like people
Mm.
see me and they don't realize I'm dealing with all this stuff. And
Mhm.
maybe other people with diabetes are also dealing with this stuff. So I'm gonna take a picture of my stuff. And so I like put the stuff on the floor of my cubicle and I was like, okay, picture. And then I like tagged it and stuff. And a bunch of people saw the post and were like, oh my God, like I didn't even know you had diabetes. Like this isn't something I knew you were dealing with. And I was just like, oh
Ah.
my God, like this is wild. And then I found that like online type 1 diabetes community and I started like posting more content and making like little get ready with me videos while I change my Dexcom or get ready with me while I change my insulin pump. Like just little things that were already a part of like my day to day, but
Mm.
they were bringing other people joy. And even if it wasn't like it was bringing me joy to be able to talk about this instead of just like
Yeah.
holding it all inside. There's a Maya Angelou quote that there is no story harder to tell than the one that goes untold. And I just felt like I had so much to say and I just, why not say it? So
Mm.
then 2020 happened and I was like, what a great opportunity to like continue to create content when people are consuming so much of it. And that's kind of like how I started to create like my own little place in the diabetes world, for
Yeah.
example.
Yeah. I want to go back to one thing you said about invisible illness, and that's something I've heard in, other heroes that I've interviewed about kind of navigating that. You don't look sick, right? So how have you kind of handled that kind of aspect of diabetes?
I think that the world is growing because I remember being small and looking for diabetes advocates, like people
Mhm.
who looked like me that had diabetes. And the only
Right.
people I could think of were like BB King and Wilford Brimley. And no offense to either one of those gentlemen, so talented, so great. Don't look like either one of you. Like I
Yeah.
just could not relate. It wasn't me.
Hmm.
And so I think that, if you want someone to read a book and nobody's written it yet, write it yourself. So I was like, maybe I can be that person for someone. Like I can't speak to everyone's diabetes experience. It's very much not a monolith. Like it's not a sweater. It doesn't just fit all.
Hmm.
But I can talk about my experience and what I'm going through. And maybe that could help someone that also looks like me and is struggling with similar things because it,
Yeah.
it is really hard to live with diabetes
Hmm.
and to have no one.
Hmm. Yeah. I love that you said if you see a story that hasn't been written, write it. That's a great phrase. I like that a lot. So, you've also used your platform to discuss advocacy related issues surrounding healthcare and diabetes, topics such as cost, affordability, accessibility, barriers to care. Why was it important for you to cover these topics?
So I am very lucky that my parents are my parents.
Mhm.
I always said that I am a product of both of them, and I wouldn't be half of the person that I am without them. And I remember when I was graduating from high school and going to college, and my mom's a teacher and my dad's like an entrepreneur, always trying to figure it out. So like insurance was a problem. Like it wasn't something that I could just hop onto my mom's insurance because I have three brothers and insurance in the school district was like half her paycheck. And
Mm.
so she looked at me and she was like, we need to be able to figure this out together. There has to be systems or opportunities available. And we figured out through how like local healthcare, through the Parkland Healthcare Plus system, I would be able to like prove my income, which as a student was like nothing,
Mm.
and get my insulin and my appointments and endocrinology essentially for free. Like I grew up a Medicaid kid on the system, kind of relying on the government to get me what I needed. And I was like, okay, I'm still a person who doesn't have an income trying to get through college. So like, how do I do this? And if my mom would have said, let's sit down, like let's look it up, let's go to a local church, let's go to the local hospital, let's see what options are available to you. If I didn't have my mom, I wouldn't have been able to figure that out. So how can I help explain this to people who were
Mm.
not raised by Edna Musa to
Mhm.
like, hey, there are resources available for you. Don't be scared. You just have to like look around and find them. So I
Yeah.
try to like be a place where people can ask questions or
Mhm.
send someone, or even like if I have extra supplies, send them out. Because we're a community of people that are all dealing with the same condition, even if it's a different degree of it. So
Mhm.
we try to help each other out as much as possible, and I try to do that as much as I can.
Yeah. And just one last point on social media, how has that kind of finding that community and also being a voice for that community, how has that experience been for you?
Sometimes it's beautiful and sometimes it's heartbreaking because there are limitations to what we are able to do as people living with diabetes.
Mm.
There have been really inspiring moments. There was a drive of supplies that I did for people living in Egypt who needed help with diabetes. And like I was able to raise like $3,000. People sent so many things that I had to like bring two extra suitcases with me to Egypt. And
Wow.
then I connected with a girl in Egypt that I didn't even know. I met her on the internet. And now she's one of my best friends. Shout out to Iman. I love her. And her sister, who also has type 1, and her parents are doctors. Like these are people who, if you're thinking in that situation, should have the ultimate access to healthcare. But I brought them their first CGMs because they didn't have access to them.
Wow.
So when you meet other people, you build that connection with them, and diabetes really is the bridge for you. Like that's where you guys meet. You can really build a lifelong support network, not just for yourself, but also for them, because now we're like still doing work in Egypt, especially with how many displaced people are there now after everything that's happening in Gaza. Like there are so many people with diabetes in that region of the world who need help. And somehow people here in the United States were able to help them. And that's beautiful. So
Yeah.
there's been some beautiful experiences like those, and then other not so great ones where you meet people that you're like, gosh, I wish I would have met you 15 years ago because you needed me. I didn't. I wasn't there.
Yeah.
So it's kind of both. It's two edges of a really sometimes sharp sword.
Yeah. Well, it's really important and, thank you for doing what you do and the, resources you're connecting people with. So, my hero, we like to recognize people who have embraced challenges and turned them into something powerful and hopeful for others. So, can you just share some ways that you have not let your own obstacles define you and your life?
I'm trying to think. I feel like I don't do a very good job of explaining that because I just am like go, 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 go all the time. I try not to like sit and think all the time.
Mhm.
But what I would say is small impact makes a big impact.
Mm,
There are small clinical trials that could use a person. It doesn't matter who you are, where you're from, what your economic ability is, but there are trials available that you can participate in that could really help the world as a whole. So those are one of the big things that I'm always advocating for is just more representation in our clinical trials because that way it creates accessibility, more conversation around time and range for everybody living with diabetes. It's a crazy fact to me that most people with diabetes in our country in the United States do not have access to a constant glucose monitor, especially people with type 2. Like, this is life-saving technology. So if you're someone who doesn't have access to that and you think, oh, well, it's not for me, I don't need it, please talk to your doctor and look for resources in your area that will help you get that technology funded because we do have programs in our country that help people get them. You just have to ask and look for them. Don't let your own sadness, your own hurt stop you from saving yourself. You
yeah,
don't just have to advocate for everyone else, but you are the most important person in your life,
yeah,
and you have to look out for you the best way that you can. So
yeah.
that's what I would say about not letting myself be my own like overcoming the obstacle because diabetes doesn't just impact how you feel physically. It
Mhm.
can cause depression based off of your blood sugars fluctuating all
Mm,
the time. It can
mhm.
cause anxiety. It can cause pain. It can
Yeah,
cause all kinds of things. So you have to stick up for you and say, listen, I want to be there for future me because I want to be here in the future. So what can I do to make that happen?
yeah, yeah, that's really important. So we like to conclude our interviews by asking, what would you tell your younger self knowing what you know now?
Ooh. I've been asked this question before and I always kind of say the same thing, but and it sounds silly, but when you're small, because I was really small,
Hmm.
I didn't think I was gonna be here when I was after 25. Like
Really?
I
Wow.
yeah, so and I remember my parents didn't either. Like my mom, when I was in high school dating someone, it was like my first boyfriend or anything. My mom was telling me a few years ago. She was like, I remember how sweet it seemed like young love. And she
Hmm.
said that she cried herself to sleep the first time I went on a date because she was like, she doesn't know. Like, she doesn't know that this is like maybe all she'll get to experience. Like, maybe she won't get like a full life of love and like the way you see it in the movies. And my mom was like heartbroken that that was like what she had been taught was going to be my experience. And I remember her thinking to herself, the little boy who like likes my daughter, like he doesn't know either. Like he just
Mm.
thinks she's a normal girl. Fast forward to now, it's 2024, and it's sad to say, but he passed away about 10 years ago. And my mom is like, life is so interesting because
Wow.
you never know what's going to happen. You just
Yeah.
trying to like tell yourself, but you don't know. So the number one thing that I would told myself and my parents is it's gonna be okay. Regardless of what happens,
Hmm.
life is short and it's long at the same time. It
Mm.
is all gonna be okay. It's gonna work out. Life is happening for you, not to you. And the things that you guys are doing to make her a strong person are really like the payoff has been incredible to like live myself and to like see my parents be so proud of me. So
Yeah.
I wish I could have like hugged little me and really hugged my mom because I know how hard it was for her and been like, it's gonna be okay, mom. Like, it's gonna be okay.
Yeah. You have an incredible family. You are just, it's so incredible to hear you speak about this and so, so positive and so authentic in, your story. And so thank you so much for sharing with us, Eritrea. And thank you for partnering with us on My Hero 360 today.
Thank you for having me. I hope if this helps even one person, this would have been completely, totally worth the time. And I'm glad that we got to do it.
Yeah, I think it's going to help more than one. So thank you again. Appreciate it so much.